Welcome to the Think Forward podcast, where we speak with futurists, innovators, and big thinkers. Come along with your host, Steve Fisher, and explore the future together.
Welcome back to Foundations in Foresight, a Think Forward series. I'm Steve Fisher, and today we're tackling something that can make or break your entire foresight practice. Communication. Let's be honest. You could have the most brilliant insights about the future, spot emerging super shifts before anyone else, and design the most robust scenarios imaginable. But if you can't communicate those insights effectively, all that brilliant work sits in a report that nobody reads or understands. We've all been there. That moment when you've done incredible foresight work, you're excited about sharing these profound insights. And then you see the glazed looks, the polite nods, and the complete absence of any meaningful action afterward. It's not that your insights weren't valuable. It's that your communication didn't bridge the gap between complex futures thinking and actionable understanding. Today, we're going to fix that problem. We'll explore how to transform your complex foresight work into compelling narratives that don't just inform, they inspire action. We'll look at the barriers to effective futures communication, proven techniques to overcome them, and how to tailor your approach for different audiences and objectives. Let's dive in. First, let's understand why communicating futures insights is uniquely challenging. The future is inherently abstract. Unlike reporting on what happened yesterday, you're talking about possibilities that don't exist yet. You're asking people to imagine conditions, technologies, or social structures they haven't experienced. That cognitive leap is much bigger than most communicators appreciate. Another challenge is complexity. Futures thinking isn't linear. It involves multiple interacting variables, feedback loops, and uncertainties. Most traditional communication approaches struggle to capture this rich interconnectedness without becoming overwhelming. And then there's the emotional dimension. Futures work often challenges deep assumptions about how things should be. People don't just process futures intellectually, they respond emotionally, especially when scenarios suggest changes to their identity, status, or sense of control. If you've ever shared a bold future scenario only to face immediate resistance or dismissal, you've encountered this emotional barrier firsthand. So how do we overcome these challenges? By turning to the most powerful communication tool humans have ever developed: storytelling. Humans are hardwired for stories. We've been using narratives to make sense of complex realities for thousands of years, long before spreadsheets, data visualizations, or PowerPoint presentations. When you frame futures insights as narratives rather than abstract concepts, several powerful things happen. First, you make the abstract concrete. Instead of talking about demographic shifts in the abstract, a story lets you show an aging population through the eyes of a community adapting to new needs and opportunities. Second, you create an emotional connection. Stories engage both the analytical and emotional parts of the brain, creating richer, more memorable experiences than data alone can provide. And third, you provide context and meaning. Stories help people understand not just what might change, but why it matters to them personally and professionally. The best futures communicators don't just present scenarios, they craft narratives that help people see themselves in those futures, understand the implications, and envision possible responses. Now let's look at some practical techniques for turning complex futures insights into compelling narratives. 1. The day in the life approach. One of the most effective methods is to bring your scenarios down to the human scale through day in the life narratives. Instead of discussing broad societal trends, show what those trends mean for a specific person on a typical day. For example, if you're exploring the future of work transformed by AI and automation, don't just list predicted changes. Instead, walk your audience through a workday in 2030. Maria wakes up at 7 a.m. as her AI assistant briefs her on overnight developments with the Shanghai project. While getting ready, she reviews the automated drafts her collaborative AI has prepared based on yesterday's meetings. By 8:30, she's in her home office, joining colleagues from 3 continents in an immersive virtual workspace where their AI team member has already prepared 3 potential solutions to yesterday's engineering challenge. This approach makes abstract futures tangible. It helps people visualize implications at a practical level they can relate to and respond to. 2. The contrast narrative. Another powerful technique is to highlight transformation through contrast, showing the before and after of a significant change. For instance, when discussing the healthcare implications of BioNexus, you might contrast, just 5 years ago, Karen's diabetes diagnosis meant daily glucose monitoring, regular doctor visits, and a lifetime of medication management. Today, her biomonitoring implant continuously optimizes her treatment, Her doctor receives real-time alerts only when intervention is needed, and her personalized treatment plan has reduced her medication needs by 70%. This approach highlights the magnitude of change by anchoring it in familiar realities before introducing new possibilities. 3. The stakes-based narrative. Sometimes, the most compelling futures narratives focus on what's at stake in different scenarios. This approach works especially well when you need to motivate action or decision-making. For example, when discussing climate adaptation strategies, if we continue with current approaches, by 2035, our coastal facilities face a 60% increased flood risk and potential insurance premium hikes of 300%. However, by implementing the distributed resilience strategy we've outlined, we can not only mitigate these risks but potentially create new value through community partnerships and sustainability leadership. By clearly articulating what's at stake in different futures, you create a compelling case for action that goes beyond abstract possibilities. 4. The artifact from the future. One of my favorite approaches is creating artifacts from the future, tangible objects, documents, or media that might exist in your envisioned scenarios. Imagine sharing a future job description, a product announcement, or a news headline from your scenario year. These artifacts make futures concrete in a way that descriptions alone cannot. For example, if you're exploring educational transformation, you might create a student transcript from 2035, showing credits for AI collaboration, climate adaptation projects, and micro-credentials from multiple global institutions rather than a traditional degree. These artifacts spark imagination, generate discussion, and make abstract futures immediately graspable. Even the best narrative techniques fail if they don't resonate with your specific audience. Different stakeholders have different priorities, communication preferences, and decision-making styles. For executive leadership, focus on strategic implications, competitive positioning, and clear decision points. Time is precious for executives, so lead with your most important insights and connect directly to current strategic priorities. With operational teams, emphasize practical implications and transition pathways. These audiences want to understand how potential changes affect daily work and what steps might be needed to prepare or adapt. For board members and investors, balance opportunity and risk narratives and connect futures insights to long-term value creation. These audiences are particularly sensitive to how futures work translates to organizational resilience and competitive advantage. When communicating with broader audiences or communities, emphasize shared values and inclusive visions. Public-facing futures communication should create space for diverse perspectives and avoid techno-deterministic narratives that can alienate or disempower. Beyond the content of your narratives, the format you choose significantly impacts how people engage with and act upon your insights. For driving immediate decisions, consider decision-focused briefings that clearly connect futures insights to current choices. Structure these around specific questions. Given what we know about these trends, should we invest in X or Y? This creates a direct bridge from foresight to action. For building ongoing futures awareness, develop regular signals briefings that highlight emerging changes in a digestible format. These shorter, more frequent communications keep futures thinking alive between major strategic exercises. For deeper engagement, workshop narratives can transform passive audiences into active participants. Instead of simply presenting scenarios, involve people in extending or challenging them. This co-creation leads to stronger buy-in and more creative responses. For public or multi-stakeholder communication, transmedia storytelling, using multiple formats and platforms to tell different parts of your futures narrative, can reach diverse audiences where they are. This might include articles, videos, social media, and interactive elements that together create a rich, multi-perspective view of possible futures. Despite your best efforts, you'll likely encounter resistance to futures narratives. Understanding and addressing these barriers is crucial for effective communication. One common barrier is future shock, the cognitive and emotional overwhelm that comes from confronting significant change. When your scenarios suggest major disruptions to familiar patterns, people may simply shut down or dismiss them as unrealistic. To address this, use pacing techniques that start with near-term, more familiar futures before introducing more transformative possibilities. Also, balance challenge with opportunity in your narratives. People need to see possibilities for positive action, not just threats. Another barrier is confirmation bias, our tendency to accept futures that confirm existing beliefs and reject those that challenge them. This is particularly problematic when communicating with diverse stakeholders who may have very different assumptions about what's possible or desirable. To overcome this, explicitly acknowledge different perspectives in your narratives. Consider using multiple narrators or viewpoints within your scenarios to show how the same future might be experienced differently depending on one's position or values. Finally, beware of abstraction fatigue, the tendency for audiences to disengage from futures that feel too distant from their immediate concerns. Even the most compelling 2050 scenario will fail to drive action if people can't connect it to decisions they need to make next week or next month. Address this by creating future-to-present links in your communication. After exploring longer-term scenarios, explicitly work backward to identify near-term implications and actions. This creates a sense of agency and practical relevance that purely speculative futures often lack. But how do you know if your future's communication is working? Unlike many communication efforts that can be measured through immediate engagement metrics, the impact of futures communication often unfolds over time. That said, there are several indicators you can track. First, look for decision influence. Are your futures insights being cited in strategic discussions? Are they referenced in planning documents or investment cases? This indicates your communication is penetrating organizational thinking. Second, observe for shifts in language and framing. Do you notice stakeholders adopting terms, metaphors, or time horizons from your futures work in their own communications? This suggests your narratives are reshaping how people think about possible futures. Third, monitor for futures-oriented questions. Are people in your organization starting to ask different questions that reflect longer-term, more systemic thinking? This indicates a shift from reactive to anticipatory mindsets. And finally, track implementation of futures-informed initiatives. Are new projects, policies, or practices emerging that directly respond to the futures you've communicated? This is the ultimate measure of whether your communication is driving meaningful action. Now let's bring it all together. Remember, effective futures communication isn't about predicting what will happen. It's about expanding what people can imagine and, crucially, what they believe they can influence. When done well, futures communication transforms abstract possibilities into actionable insights. It bridges the gap between foresight and strategy, helping organizations anticipate change rather than merely react to it. So here's my challenge to you. Take one complex futures insight you're currently working with. It could be related to a super shift we've discussed, a scenario you've developed, or a weak signal you've identified. Now reshape that insight using one of the narrative techniques we've explored today. Create a day-in-the-life story, develop a contrast narrative, or design an artifact from the future. Then share it with a colleague or stakeholder and observe how they engage with it compared to your usual communication approach. Remember, the power of your foresight work isn't measured by how accurately you envision the future. It's measured by how effectively you help others see new possibilities and take meaningful action today. In our next episode, we'll build on these communication principles as we explore leading through super shift disruption, examining the unique leadership qualities needed to navigate transformative change. Until then, keep exploring possibilities, keep crafting compelling narratives, and as always, think forward.
Thanks for listening to the Think Forward podcast. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms and at www.thinkforwardshow.com, as well as on YouTube under Think Forward Show. See you next time.